Hello, this is Rabbi Tobin, B'nai Shalom, and it's Monday Talmud. Today is July 8th. Welcome to our class. I apologize, last week we had technical difficulties, and about 5 minutes in the internet connection streaming cut out, and I couldn't fix it while I was teaching, so you'll have to catch up on your own. We're on chapter 3 of Sanhedrin Zebarer, page 30b, and if you are in the Schottenstein from the Art Scroll Press, it's 30b-4, which is our main English text that we work from in this class. All right. So just when you thought you were done with Yoshua ben Korcha, he's going to make a cameo again today. So we need to review a couple things and then move forward. We are getting out of most of what we've been in, but we're going to do some things that are analogous to it. So Yehoshua ben Korcha was at the epicenter of the disturbance about combining testimony. And remember, combining testimony, there were a bunch of different ways people were arguing about this. For the most part, people were being pretty sensible about how to combine testimony and how not to combine testimony. The main difference, where there's a very principled difference, is if two people are testifying about two different loans that are for the same amount between the same two people, do those two different individual witnesses combine and form a pair of witnesses proving that A owes B 100? After all, each of them saw A owe B 100. A and B might acknowledge that they had this thing happen in front of each of them, but if it's two different loans, there's an argument about whether or not that constitutes two witnesses. If it's one loan and the two witnesses are testifying at two different times before the court, let's say 10 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon, but they were never together, or Monday and Tuesday and they were never together, but they're both testifying to the exact same event, there seems to be more support for combining the two of them and making it a legitimate testimony. So two people testifying on separate days about the same event are often combined in monetary cases. Two people testifying together about two different but identical events, Yehoshua ben Korcha allows them to be combined. That's basically the thing, right? And we've been...
Can you be a witness to two different things?
Sure. Let's say you hang out on a street corner in downtown. You see all kinds of things. You might get called into court 20 times a day for the things you see. Sure, why not? And there also were, like there are notaries today, professional witnesses, right? People who seem to work at the court, and they are teams of witnesses who are kosher witnesses. And you have this, very often a rabbi working with divorce decrees, Gittin, for example, will have their two witnesses that they use for the writing of the get. Now, they might use anybody in the minyan for the appointing of an agent to deliver a get that's already been written, but usually they'll be very, very careful about who the witnesses are when the get itself is actually physically being written. The witnesses that's being written properly are impeccable witnesses because they're the ones saying that the document is actually kosher. The other people are just saying the document is being delivered. And that's kind of two different levels. So somebody will very often have their favorite witnesses who they use if they're just like you have an in-house notary. I notarize all the cemetery deeds here. Gary signs them on behalf of the congregation, and I notarize them as a notary. Right?
So if I need a notary, I can...
I'm a notary, sure.
Yeah, you notarize something for me.
Always happy to notarize things.
Yeah. They keep asking me if I'm still alive.
Someday you should tell them no and see what happens. All right. So we're on 30b-4. Gemara turns to a related topic, whether the testimony of two witnesses can be combined when they provide contradictory descriptions to an event. All right? So now, unfortunately, we have to pause because chapter 5 of Sanhedrin, which you do not have in front of you, has a very, very long Mishnah, which we now need to know. Otherwise, this is not going to make any sense. So one of the things that we've pointed out before, and this is a rather, that the Talmud does not go in any particular order. Every page of Talmud presumes that you know every other page of Talmud. So it can reference or quote things from anywhere at any time. It doesn't assume that you start in, order, Zeraim, Tractate, Barachot, Chapter 1, Mishnah 1. It doesn't assume that you do that. It just assumes you know everything at all times. So, even within a tractate, in Chapter 3, they assume you already know everything in Chapter 5, even though you're studying Chapter 3. So that's what's happening here. So I'm going to skip now to Chapter 5.
What page?
You don't have it in front of you.
We only have chapter 3.
All right, and I'm going to read fairly quickly a long Mishnah, which is on page 40A, if you want to look it up on the internet at home, but I don't think you have 40A.
I only go 31B3.
Yeah, you only go through chapter 3. I didn't give you chapter 4 or 5. I'm all the way out in chapter 5 now. Okay, so it goes like this. The topic in chapter 5 is witnesses who contradict each other in capital cases. So in a death penalty case, as you would imagine, the rabbis are very, very reticent to convict anybody. It's hard to convict anybody in a capital case. In a money case, it's easier. What we're going to learn in this Mishnah is that there was a particular procedure that the judges went through when they had witnesses in front of them. And it was fairly deliberate with the money cases, and it was much more strenuous with capital cases. But in monetary cases, there were 7 things that they asked every single witness before they heard any of the details of the case. They wanted to know, and we're going to see it, the details of your ability to have actually been a witness there. So these are the things that you can have what's called hazama, edim zomamim, which we talked about before, witnesses who can be contradicted, witnesses who are contradicted in that they weren't there. They couldn't possibly have been there at that time to see what they're testifying to. Those are the witnesses who are punished with whatever it is the victim of their crime would have been punished with. So if it's money and an extra fifth, and if it's a capital case, they would be executed. So the first 7 things we're going to ask are the 7 things that you can become an Eid Zomem on. Okay, they are the 7 things that establish that you were there in the time and place and could possibly have seen what was going on. All right, so I'm going to just read them to you. Hayu bodkin otam b'sheva chakirot. There's going to be 2 words, chakira and bidika. Chakira is the first 7 where they establish the broadest facts of the case, and then bidika is a further investigation. It's not the initial investigation, but it's supplementary questioning. So the chakira is, state your name, etc. And the bidika is the second half of every Perry Mason episode, right? Where he starts asking those other questions, where people who are lying will inevitably trip themselves up, right? So chakira is the first half of a Perry Mason, and bidika is the second half of a Perry Mason, okay? So here we go. Hayu bodkinotan b'sheva chakirot. They would ask them 7 chakirot in their opening questions, and they asked everybody the same 7. Be'eza shavua, in what 7-year period, shavua does not mean week here, it's a 7-year period. So in the sabbatical year cycle, it was at year 1, year 2, year 3. Presumably everybody would know that. Remember, it's an agricultural society. Be'eza shana, in which year was it? So which year of the cycle and which year, right? So it's the 4th year of the cycle and the year was 5778 or whatever. Be'eza chodesh, what month was it? Uvechama b'chodesh, and how many of the month, meaning
How
the
many
date
days?
within the month. Be'eza yom,
What day?
what day of the week was it? Right? And be'eza sha'ah,
What hour?
and at what hour of the day? Be'eza makom,
In what place?
in what place was it? And that's it. Those are the 7. So where in the sabbatical cycle, which year number was it? What month was it? What day of the month was it? What day of the week was it? What place was it in? And what did I miss?
Time.
Fine.
And what time of day? And what time of day? Okay, those are the 7.
Everything is like time except for one thing. All of them are time.
It's time, place. Right?
Yeah, but what happens if he wasn't there? If he heard?
Well, then he's
Okay.
lying and he's in a lot of trouble. Because you have to testify that you were there. You can't testify that you heard this happened. That's not testimony. You have to have seen it for you to be a witness.
I thought that maybe if he heard somebody say, I owe him money.
Then he would have to say at what day, time, and place he heard that guy say that. Right? He's still testifying to something that happened, not something he heard. It's something he experienced. He saw, he heard, he was told, he read, whatever. That happened somewhere at some time. He needs to be able to locate that in space and time. Exactly. All right? To be an aid. And if that's proven wrong, he's an aid zomem. Any one of those 7 things wrong can make him an aid zomem. Okay. So, now, in a murder case, Makarina tem oto, they go on and they ask other questions in a murder case. Do you recognize him? And here they're helping us to say we're referring to the victim. He tratembo, did you warn him? Not the victim, but the murderer. In other words, you formally said, you know the Torah forbids you to do that on penalty of death, right? You have to say that to the murderer before you can be a witness to convict him of
And the
murder.
murderer is standing there, he's not running away?
Whatever he's doing, if you didn't warn him that it's forbidden by the Torah to commit murder, then we don't have good enough testimony. The rabbis do not like to convict people of murder. They don't like to execute people. They really don't like the death penalty. It's all over the Torah, and they legislate it almost entirely out of existence. Okay? Then it says, Ha'oved avodah zarah, if the capital crime that you're witnessing, and this is their favorite one, it's not actually murder, their favorite capital crime is idolatry, which is the death penalty offense. So the rabbis will often talk about this as a crime a person can commit, but it doesn't have a victim, and you're testifying that you saw them commit idolatry, which would commit them to death under Torah law. So if it's avodah zarah, the rabbis would then go on and ask the witness, et mi avad uvame avad. Whom did he worship, and with what did he worship? So I saw him worship, Zeus, if Zeus is a foreign god, let's say Baal, a Canaanite god, clear case. I saw him worship Baal, and I saw him do it with a ram. He offered a ram to Baal.
What
Or
if
I-
he just walked into a church?
A church is not idolatry.
Well, that's not.
They worship the one true God. So that's not idolatry. A church is not idolatry. A mosque is not idolatry. You can go in and out of churches. You can go in and out of mosques. You should not participate in their religious services while you are there, but you should also treat it with the respect due a house of God. A pantheon, again, I'm not going to talk about modern cases, because once we rule that something is in fact idolatry, what we are supposed to do to them and what we are not allowed to do with them is extreme. So I don't ask modern cases of idolatry. But historically in Canaan, the pantheon would have been forbidden. So worshiping Baal or worshiping Ashtoreth, which was a feminine fertility goddess that had sacred groves and stuff that we see in the Torah. You're supposed to, cut them down and burn them and not worship to them. If you say, I saw, him worshiping the fertility goddess with an Ashtoreth, then that would be answering these questions. I saw who he worshipped, and I saw how he worshipped. Okay? So they have to answer both of those questions. Kol hamarbe bebidikot harezeh mishubach, which is interesting. You should hear the Mishnah language of the Haggadah here. Anybody who increases in their supplemental questioning, that second half of the Perry Mason story, harezeh mushubach. This one is praiseworthy. So we have that in the Haggadah, Kol Chaim Harei Zeh Mishubach. But who expounds even more on the going out of Egypt, that person is praiseworthy. So this Kol Hamarbe Mishubach, anybody who does more and more and more, is very, very praiseworthy. All right. Maaseh Vadak ben Zakai be'uktzei ta'anim. This is still the Mishnah in chapter 5. There was a story that Ben Zakkai talked about the twigs of figs, and the twigs of figs was a murder case where he said he broke off a branch from from a fig tree, and he impaled the person with it. He stabbed him to death with it, and the judge asked him, how big was the twig? Right? So you should have that's an easy answer. You're a witness. Was it this and big around, or was it little, and was it a bunch of little jabs, or was it like he impaled him? You should be able to answer that question. So that's an example of bidika. Ma ben chakira lebidika. So what's the difference between the chakira and the bidika? Chakira, the standard questions, echad omer eno yodea, and this is where we get into today's case. So one says, I don't know. You have two testimonies, and you ask them what day of the week it was, and one of them says, I don't know. I don't remember what day of the week it was. All right? Edutan betelin, their testimony is nullified. So if one of them fails or doesn't know, on any one of the seven, their entire testimony is thrown out, both of them, because you don't have two kosher witnesses. Okay? And he's not saying something wrong, he's just saying, I don't remember. I don't know what day of the week it was. Could have been a Tuesday, could have been a Thursday, what do I know?
Now, all three judges ask questions.
The Hakira is done to everybody. These 7 questions are asked by the Beit Din as a group to the witness every single time. After that the witnesses have passed that level of test, any judge can ask any witness anything they want.
My first question is, what were you doing there?
Right. All right. Ve'afilu shnayim omrim ein anu yod'in. Even if both say we do not know, edutan kayemet. In that case, their testimony is upheld. Hang on, I skipped something. Okay, man bechaki rabbi bidika, echad omer eni yodea, edutan betelin. In bidikot, sorry, I skipped a line. So in bidikot, in supplemental questions, echad omer eni yodea, afilu shnayim omrim ein anu yod'im, edutan kayemet. So in supplemental questions, I could say, well, what color was his left sock? The guy goes, I don't know. I ask the other guy. The other guy goes, I don't know. Right? The court case can continue. Their testimony is still kosher because I'm asking them extraneous details and they're not coming up with them. But they know where they were, they know when it was, they know what day of the week it was, they know what time it was. If it's a capital case, they recognize the person, they've said I warned the offending person, like they've passed those things completely, and now I'm asking them about details, right?
When you talk about time during the day, they didn't have hours.
Right.
Now, so it's more like mid-time.
Yeah, we'll see that at the end of the Mishnah. There's going to be some things that take that into account. Remember, the clock was the sun. So when the clock was directly overhead, it was noon. In the summer and the winter, that happens at different proportions of the sunlight. It's not halfway through the sunlight, but the top of the sky is noon. And then there's 6 hours to one side of it, and there's 6 hours to the other side of it. So the first quarter of the way up, you divide it into 3 hours. The next quarter of the way up, you can divide into 3 hours. So it's hour 1, hour 2, hour 3, hour 4, hour 5, hour 6, hour 7, hour 8, hour 9, hour 10, hour 11, hour 12. Okay? And that's what they would be saying, which sha'ah was it? They're really saying which...
Which quarter?
There's a better word. It's which angle of the sky, okay? Or the best word is which arc. Which arc of the sky was the sun in? The first, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. And they need to be able to identify where the sun was when it happened.
I guess you have sun
No, they didn't have sundials on their wrists. You've been watching the Flintstones too much.
Was there morning, afternoon, and evening? Was that the?
They understood morning, they understood afternoon, and they understood evening, and they understood, night,
Right.
darkness. But they did talk about hours. They knew what the hours were. I grew up in a rural area. I always knew two things without a watch. I knew which way was north, and I knew what hour of the day it
That's right,
was. I always knew from the sun and the shadows what time it was and which way is north. The idea that people drive around here and they don't know if they're going north, south, east, or west drives me crazy. Like they say, where is it? And I say, it's west of here. And they go, where's west?
Yeah.
Or they look at their iPhones to figure out which direction to pray. And every minion I go to now, they're looking at a thing on their iPhone. I'm like, look out the window. The sun just went down. Where did it go down? I don't know.
And I'm giving someone directions where the streets are in the grid.
They're in a
North,
grid.
East and west. I'll say the north side of the street, they have no idea what I'm talking about.
All they have to do is look at the street post on the corner and look at its shadow. Okay? Its shadow will be pointing directly towards, if you take the shadow to the post, it's pointing to the sun. And then you should know morning, noon, evening, if that is
I
pointing.
only know right and left.
Well, I hope you know right from wrong. That's okay, here we go. So in any event, Hakirot and Bidikot. So in Bidikot, the supplemental questions, the two witnesses can both say, I don't know, and their testimony is still fine. Okay? Now, Echad Hakirot ve'echad Bidikot, both of these types of testimony are treated the same bisman shemachshishin ze et ze, when they actually contradict each other, edutan b'teilin. Okay? So whether it's a hakira or a bidika, if the two testimonies contradict each other according to the statement in the Mishnah we just read, their testimonies are thrown out. So what's interesting is, in the hakira section, you don't need to have contradiction for the testimonies to be thrown out. You just need one of the two not to be able to give the qualifying answer. All right, even if he says, I don't know, no good, you're out. In the bidika, if you say, I don't know, and the other person does know, that's not a contradiction. If you both say, I don't know, that's not a contradiction. But in the bidika, if I say it was a blue sock and you say it was a green sock, and we're firm on that, right? That's a contradiction, and then we have to figure out, is that enough of a contradiction to throw the testimony out?
Because the truth was in between, exactly.
Unless we're arguing about the sock having been the thing that was stolen. In which case, then I have to know what the color was, or I wasn't looking at the thing that was stolen, right? If it was, he was bowing down over there and I caught a glimpse of his sock, well, who cares, right? So we're going to have to figure out what the essential thing is. All right. I don't normally go back and reteach something, but you'll be lost for the rest of the day if I don't. When witnesses come before the judges ask 7 questions called hakira. Those 7 questions are year in the sabbatical cycle, number of the year, what month was it, what day of the month, what day of the week was it, what time did it happen, and where was it. If you can answer those 7 things, you are potentially a kosher witness. If you miss on any one of those 7, you are not an acceptable witness, no matter what the case was, no matter what the stakes are. And if I have 2 witnesses and one of the 2 misses one of those 7 questions, the 2 are thrown out. Because I don't, because I'll pishnayim yakum davar. I need 2 witnesses to establish something. So it's like I have nobody. So I have 2 witnesses, and one of them's got 7 out of 7, and the other's got 6 out of 7. I've got nothing. Now, there's a second level, which I call the second half of the Perry Mason episode, where the judges can ask other questions to try and figure out, are they telling the truth and so forth, beyond those 7. That's called bidika. The standard for bidika is lower. In Hakira, if I say what day of the week it was, and you say, I don't know, you're out of here. But in Bidika, I ask you something, and you don't know, you're still here. It's okay, you didn't know. I'll ask the other guy, maybe he knows. And if anyone's saying, I don't know, in Bidika, it's still okay. Is that you? Yeah, okay. It's still okay, but if they say something in Hakira or Bidika that contradicts each other, now they're gone. So the witnesses can't contradict each other, which is basically what you have to be saying the same thing.
Now, is there ever a time limit on a case?
Is there a statute of limitations? No,
No?
no.
It could be like 7 years from now
Sure,
that they bring it?
sure.
But they have to remember it.
Yeah, they're still gonna have to be able to remember what day in the sabbatical cycle it was, what the year was, what the month was. I don't know what I had for breakfast 3 days ago, so
So how do they ever resolve a case with all this?
you bring people to testimony quickly, you bring people to court quickly. And if you can't, you move on. It's a less litigious society.
They never resolve anything.
They resolved everything that could and should be resolved in a relatively quick fashion and in a very personal way. And there were no lawyers, which is probably why things happened in a fairly quick way. Right? Because nobody was getting paid hourly to come up with things that needed to be done. Right? Yeah. Okay, here we go. So, I'm reading from the Mishnah in the beginning of chapter 5, Ira, which you do not have in front of you. But we need to understand this Mishnah in order to understand today's sugya. So, God willing, we'll actually get back to today's sugya by the end of today. All right, so the next thing is, Echad omer b'shnayim b'chodesh, ve'echad omer b'shlosha b'chodesh. So one day said it was one of the two witnesses in the Chakira said it was the second day of the month. And the other witness said it's the third day of the month, right? So according to what we just read, it's contradiction in a chakirah. So they should be thrown out. This testimony should not stand. However, in fact, it says edutan kayemet. Their testimony is still okay. And do you have any guess why that might be?
The writing perfectly. The 29-day
Right. They may not be an expert in announcing the new month, and all they saw was there was a new moon last night or 2 nights ago. So one guy said, well, there was a new moon 2 nights ago, so this must be the second of the month. And the other guy's an expert. He knows Rosh Chodesh was a 2-day Rosh Chodesh, which makes today the third of the month, or whatever it is. And I would have to reverse those, but you get the point. So one guy knows nothing about the actual lunar calendar. He just goes by what he sees in the sky. And the other guy knows the exact details, and he might have figured out that the calendar's off. They might have actually been in the same place at the same time, and there's a reason why they'd be off by 1 day on the day of the month. He knows the year, he knows the time, he knows that it's a couple of days into Rosh Chodesh Nisan. He knows the place. If it's a capital case, he knows the guy. Like, he's hitting all his marks. The only thing that's off is the second or third day of a new moon month. Right? They're going to accept that guy. Shezeh yodea be'ibur Rosh HaChodesh, v'zeh einu yodea be'ibur Rosh HaChodesh. Because this guy knows how to intercalculate months, and the other guy doesn't. Zeh omer b'shlosha ve'echad omer b'chamisha. One says it's the third day of the month, and the other says it's the 5th day of the month. There's no way to make that honest mistake, because you never have a 2-day Rosh Chodesh. I mean, a 3-day Rosh Chodesh. You can have only a 2-day. So if you're off by 2 full days, then you guys are disagreeing for sure on what day you saw this thing happen.
Why is there a 2-day Rosh Chodesh?
Because the cycle of the moon around the earth doesn't happen in exactly 28 days. It's 28 and a fraction. So every once in a while the fraction adds up enough that to get back to the right month, you have to have an extra day.
And that's what we have.
So we have like leap days for months, and we have leap months for years, and every so many years we have a leap year for years. Yep.
To go back to what you said with the 7th, wasn't there the day of the week and the day of the month, so you know what the,
Yes.
Monday,
Yeah, on a ketubah or a get today, we write that down. I say, on the 3rd day of the week, which is the 12th day of the month of Nisan.
Right. So, if they knew the day of the week in the right year and the right month, I don't,
But they're getting something essentially wrong.
oh, okay.
So if they got the day wrong, how do you know that? I mean, if they got the date wrong, but they agree on the day, then that's also impossible.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, one,
Maybe they're right. Maybe each one of them thinks they're right about the date, and it's the day of the week they're getting wrong. At this point, we can't figure out what they're getting wrong, but something is wrong. So they're gone. They're out.
Just saying that the day of the week is pretty more, because everybody knew when Shabbos was.
Maybe there's a famous case. Somebody's traveling in the desert, and he loses track of days. Has no idea what day of the week it is. Right?
That would be
In which case,
more known.
it'd be hard to testify when, where, and how it happened. Well, it happened in the middle of a pile of sand somewhere out there on some day I don't remember as I was wandering through the desert. You're not going to be a kosher witness.
Just saying that the day of the week is a far more known quantity than the actual day of the month.
Well, with Shabbos, one would hope so. Right? One would hope so. Okay, in any event, now we go on. We're still in the Mishnah. Chapter 5 has this sprawling Mishnah to open up the chapter. Echad omer b'shtei sha'ot v'echad omer b'shalosh sha'ot. One says it's at 2 hours of the day. The other says it's the third hour of the day. Edutan kayemet. So one says, and we talked through the hours of the day, one says the sun was here, one says the sun was here.
It's close enough.
If everything else checks out, we're going to go with that. Right? Because you never know. I mean,
It was 3:15.
right.
3:30.
Now, echad omer b'shalosh ve'echad omer b'chamesh. One says it's the third hour, and the other says it's the fifth hour. Right? Edutan b'teilin. Their testimony is not going to be allowed. All right?
What if suppose it was a cloudy day with that?
Still no.
Or rainy day?
You still know. You still know. You still know. If you're not like, if you haven't been stupefied by technology, you're aware how far into the day it is. Even on a rainy day, it's less bright in the morning. It's brighter in the middle of the day. The angle of the sun is hitting you different. There are vague shadows on cloudy days, if you look for them. Right? You can still see what time it is. We're just an indoor technological society. We don't know where we are if Waze doesn't tell us.
So unless they testify to a dust storm or a deluge, they better know what time it is.
Right, but people knew. Everyone knew. You knew what time it was.
Reminds me of the song.
Here,
I mean, I've worked in the fields harvesting. Right, you know what time it is.
at 9 o'clock at night, it's dark here, but in Detroit it's light.
Okay,
Because they're in the western part of the zone.
sure, but we're talking about testimony on events where two people would be
No,
together in one
Well,
place.
it's not the same.
All right, anyways, moving on. So if it's third hour or fifth hour, it's too far apart. So it's just like the days. There's not a reasonable basis for their disagreement, except somebody is wrong or they didn't see the same thing. Now, finally, we get to why I needed to do this today. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Kayemet. So Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that if it's the third hour or the fifth hour, that you can still accept their testimony together. Echad omer b'chamesh v'echad omer b'sheva, but even according to Rabbi Yehuda, if one said 5 and one said 7, edutan b'teilin, their testimony is null. So what's the difference between making a mistake between 3 and 5 and making a mistake between 5 and 7?
Afternoon.
Because you're going afternoon. over
It's on
there.
that side of the meridian, right? It's afternoon. Even the most unaware person in the world knows if it's morning or afternoon, right? So you're just making a gross contradiction between the two of you, if it's that. So, okay. Now, Echad omer chamesh, Echad omer sheva, edutan b'teilin, b'chamesh chama min bizrach, uv'sheva chama b'marav. Because at chamesh, the sun is in the east, and at 7, the sun is in the west. Now, v'achar kach machnisim et hasheni uvodkim oto. So after they've done all of that with the first guy, now they bring in the second guy, and they do the same thing to him. Im nimtzeu divreihem mechuvanim, if they found that their words all line up, potchim bizechut, they, you know what, I don't think I need the rest of this. Yeah, I don't need the rest of it. We're going to run down a rabbit hole. So I've given you what you need to know. All right, let's go back. Page 30B4. Everyone ready?
Yeah.
30B4. Gemara turns to a related topic. Discussion of the testimony of two witnesses can be combined when they provide contradictory. Okay, so that's what the Mishnah in chapter 5 has given us the basis for. So this following discussion is going to presume you know the Mishnah that we just studied, which, thanks God, now you know. Okay, on we go. Amar Rav Yehuda. Remember Rav Yehuda? He came in at the end. He's the guy who said 3 to 5 is okay, but 5 to 7 is not. All right? Amar Rav Yehuda. Edut hamechacheshet zu it zu b'dikut k'shera b'dinei mamonot. So he says, if you have contradictory bidika, second half of the Perry Mason story, regarding monetary cases, it's still kosher. Remember, the Mishnah said whether it's monetary or capital cases, if their testimony contradicts, not I don't know, but they're actually saying things that contradict, they get thrown out in money or capital cases. Here, Rav Yehuda is being shown to say that he believes that's not the case. In bidikut, second half of Perry Mason, in money cases, less stringent, you would still allow their testimony to stand even if they contradict. Obviously, that's going to be a problem. Why?
How do you believe?
Well, what if the contradiction is about the loan? Right? Like, so it's one thing if I say he owed him $119.74. No, it was $119.75. Right? I mean, who cares? It's $100. But if it's 100 Civil War dollars, as opposed to $119.75, that might actually be a substantial difference. Or what if one person says it was $100 and the other person says it's $150? Are they contradicting each other? And now you're going to get into the Yoshua ben Karcha thing about, well, they're only contradicting each other about part of it or something. Like there's 100 there that they agree on. Right, so you see where this is going to get slippery. So we're getting in here. Now we're going to talk about, now obviously the biggest problem is one says he owes him and one says he doesn't.
That's a whole different.
Well, yeah, that's a contradiction that you can't help yourself with. So, right? So you can't prove the case, so you throw them both out, which supports the guy who said he doesn't. Because the case has been thrown out. Right? So there's a lot of tricky stuff here. Ready? Here we go. So, Amar Rava. Rava says, Mistabra milte de Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda's statement is reasonable. Be'achad omer be'arnki shechora, where one says that it's a black purse. Ve'achad omer be'arnki levana, and one says it's a white purse. Aval, achad omer mane shachor, one says it was black coins. Ve'achad omer mane lavan, and one says that it's shiny coins. Ein mitzdarfim, we can't combine them. So in the first half of the Rava case, witness one says, I saw him put $119.75 in a black drawstring bag and hand it to him. And the other person says, no, I saw him put those $100 in a white drawstring bag and hand it to him. Good or not good?
Good.
According to this.
Good. Good. I saw him put 100 Civil War dollars in. I saw him put 100 Eisenhower dollars or whatever. What is the dollar?
Washington?
Washington.
Susan B. Anthony and the Native American. Sacagawea. Those are the two today in circulation. Yeah. So I saw those. I saw Civil War. I saw those. Now you're talking about the essential testimony is actually contradicting. They both agree, I saw him give him 100, but there's something essential about it. So the purse is not essential. Another proof that it's men who wrote this. Because how could you not know what the purse was?
How could they get so close that they
Men are
could
like,
see
there's
what's
different
on-
purses?
That they could see what's on the coin.
Okay. Now, Rav Yehuda's statement, as explained by Rava, implies that in capital cases, a contradiction in a peripheral detail would make their testimonies incompatible. We know that from the Mishnah. But in money cases, Rav Yehuda is going to be, Rava thinks Rav Yehuda is going to be less strict. Now, the Gemara is going to question this. if it were a black purse in a capital case, and the white one, okay, so v'an ki shechora b'dinei nafshot lo. So here's the logic. Rabbi Yehuda said that you can contradict in a money case, but implying not a capital case. Rava comes in and goes, the level of contradiction is that a purse wouldn't matter, but if you're testifying about the coins themselves, it still would be a contradiction. So for Rav Yehuda, a purse doesn't matter. So now are we gonna put that back and say the purse doesn't matter in a capital case? See what he just did? He's going to push it back. Also, does Rav Yehuda not think it matters in a capital case? I mean, obviously, if it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. It's not a contradiction. It's not a contradiction. Or is it only not enough of a contradiction? Okay. So now, the answer to that is Va'amar Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda says, in a capital case, Echad omer be'sayif harago. One said the murderer killed him with a sword. V'echad omer be'ariran harago. And one said he killed him with a knife or a dagger. Ein ze nachon, it's not correct testimony. So unfortunately, Rav Chisda doesn't deal with the black purse or the coins because it's not money. He's going to have a case that's about a contradiction in a capital case. So think about the case. They've passed all 7 chakirot plus the extra 2 chakirot for a capital case. And now they're saying, I warned the guy, he acknowledged the warning, he killed him anyways, I saw him kill it, I recognized the victim, I recognized the murderer, I saw it all happen, and the blade was this long. And the other guy goes, oh yeah, I agree with all that except the blade was this long. Right? It was a dagger, it was a short sword. Which is it? That's enough of a contradiction that the testimony is thrown out according to Rav Chisda, and there's no conviction. Okay? It is not nachon.
So it doesn't matter the person was killed, that's irrelevant?
Well, it matters, but
They
we're
don't
not going.
care.
But we're not going to kill another person
Okay.
with this level of ambiguity in the testimony. There can be no ambiguity in the testimony or the circumstances of conviction. It's not, it's like conviction beyond a reasonable doubt. It's conviction beyond an unreasonable doubt. It's evidence beyond unreasonable doubt. That's the rabbinic standard, much higher standard. Okay, ein ze nachon. Echad omer kelav shechorim. One says he was wearing black. Ve'echad omer kelav levanim. Hare ze nachon. This would be okay. So we got from the monetary case about the purse to analogous capital case about the clothing. So the guy was wearing a white jacket, the guy was wearing a black jacket. That doesn't matter. And if you think about people who have been through the trauma of witnessing a murder, they are much more likely to fixate on the knife than the jacket. Right? So there's some reasonable thought behind this. But that's kind of a question. Moving on. The Gemara is going to answer that question, Gavra Karamit, which this chapter tends to trot out as an answer fairly often. We've seen it before. Gavra Gavra Ramet. These are two equal authorities who disagree with each other. We're on 31A1.
So I have a question. In that system, sorry to belabor the point, there's a difference between what weapon was used to kill the person. The person was still killed. Would the person who's being accused have any kind of punishment at all, or just
No, he's either convicted of murder and executed, or he's left to walk free. You can't then take OJ and put him in a civil court and convict him of some analogous crime for the same crime. Once he has been found not guilty in the capital case, that's it. Right? I think that's probably a good analogy, right?
It's not like either it's murder or planned murder or
Right.
not.
You also can't do what the DAs and prosecutors do in this country, which is, we know you did it, but we're not convinced we've got the evidence for murder 1, So we're going to ask you to cop a plea to manslaughter.
Manslaughter.
You'll go to jail for 10 years, out in 3 years with good behavior. Justice will be served. We won't waste the state's money. Did and executed, so maybe it's in your interest to admit that you did it in an open court, to apologize to the victims and the judge. The social need for justice and repentance has been met, et cetera, et cetera. None of that happens. In the rabbinic system, you are brought for what you actually did, and you are either convicted or acquitted.
And not if it was pre-planned. They don't care whether it was,
The only thing that is murder is pre-planned murder. Somebody who kills by
Accident.
mistake is not guilty of murder. That person in the biblical system can go to the cities of refuge, and in the rabbinic system, they're simply not convicted of murder. It's an accident.
it was an accident.
It's an accident.
How about a crime of passion?
That's what I was
You
gonna
catch
say.
someone with your wife, you pick up a knife and kill the guy without any forethought.
I can't, I mean, the problem is the crime of passion is a modern category, right? So to put it back on that category, I mean, that's why you have to have hatra'ah. That's why you have to have forewarning of the person, right? If the person is literally insane in jealous rage, and they'll kill anybody in front of them, right? They'll kill the busboy, they'll kill the wife, they'll kill the husband, they're just going to kill because they're so angry, they're out of their mind. Then when you say, excuse me, sir, did you know the Torah forbids you from committing murder on penalty of death? They're not going to be able to acknowledge that. So if you don't have hatra'ah, you can't execute them. You can't convict them of murder. They need to know that it's wrong for the punishment to apply in a capital case. So
What
But-
if there are no witnesses?
then you don't have a case.
Then there's no case.
There's
In
no
other words,
case.
he goes
He
free.
said, she said.
Same thing as today. If there's no evidence, there's no evidence. You can't
No, but
convict.
he commits a murder.
You cannot convict on circumstantial evidence in rabbinic law. Remember, they did not have DNA testing. They did not have fingerprinting. They could not link the knife to the killer unless a person saw it happen. That was the only way you
They
could.
can say, we saw him buy the knife.
No, we've got a case. The case in the Talmud is, I see Joe running after Sam down the street yelling, I'm going to kill you with this knife. Running with the knife. 100 witnesses see it. He runs into the room, slams the door, Sam yells, don't kill me! You hear, ah! You hear Sam yell, he's killing me! And the guy walks out with a bloody knife, drops it on the ground, and walks away. The witnesses go in, and there's nobody in there but a dead Sam, and there are no other doors and windows.
He gets away.
No one saw.
You cannot convict him of the crime. No one saw the murder.
But if Sam has family in his tribe, they will get.
In biblical
vengeance.
times, not rabbinic. In biblical times, not rabbinic. Right, you would have had the blood avenger. But that system is 3,000 years out of date. I mean, that was taken out early. The rabbis did not like death penalty. They did not want to execute people. And they have tremendous laws around it. And we spend dozens and dozens of pages in Talmud talking about how to convict somebody of death penalty. And then there's more and more pages about how to kill them. There's all these different ways of executing somebody.
Stoning.
Yeah, stoning is more like crushing with giant boulders. Burning is pouring molten lead down their mouth. There's all kinds of ways,
Why is it that they were
but they didn't do it.
free to stone a woman who
They didn't do it.
They charged her with adultery.
They didn't do it. There's not one recorded case of a woman being executed for adultery.
She might have been cast out.
They
or-
didn't do it.
They didn't.
They didn't like to murder or to kill people. The rabbis did not want to execute people. Every single page of discussion puts barriers in the way of actually executing people. They can't say death penalty is wrong because God says, kill him, kill him, kill him, kill him, kill him. It's like death penalty for parking tickets in the Torah. Like everything, half the things are death penalty. You slap your father, death penalty.
Yet if a husband accuses a wife of adultery, he brings it to the ohel, and he says, drink this.
Yes.
The rabbi says, drink
And if her
this.
body and thigh swells from the drink, she's
And
convicted.
she's guilty, and then she's taken out and she's
So-
stoned.
What are the odds of her body and thigh swelling from the drink?
Depends on what's in the drink.
Zero. Zero. It's a fake ritual.
Oh.
It's a fake ritual. I mean, with a scientific mind, I have to say it's either magic or it's fake. And either way, it never happened. No one was ever convicted in that manner. So if it's divine power, then God has protected every woman ever accused. And otherwise, it's a fake ritual whose purpose is to be catharsis for the accusation. And if he's going to bring this out in public in this manner and embarrass her in such a way, I mean, he can divorce her. The only reason to bring the sota accusation is to get her executed. Right?
Yeah.
So he can divorce her for adultery.
Did you
Yeah, but
divorce
that's-
him for adultery?
Women can't divorce men in the biblical system. Besides, he can't commit adultery in the same way she does. Like adultery in the Bible is a female crime. Right?
But they can marry multiply.
A man can marry multiply, but he can't lie with another man's wife. So he would be executed for that. But you need a married woman for adultery to happen.
David committed adultery.
Exactly. Okay, so
How do people get dissuaded not to do crimes in the biblical, at this time? Obviously, they're not gonna be able to do capital punishment but how do they get punished even though you can't prove them? You know they did it, was there like social, ostracized or something?
yeah, I mean, remember
I know there was some whipping stuff.
yeah, a lot of stuff you got flogged for, and that was no fun. And that would cut deep into your back 39 times and in a public setting.
So that was pretty much the punishment,
Yeah, that was the go-to plan for the rabbis.
real fun.
Flogging solves a lot of problems, right? But as far as, do you believe that punishment is meant to be a deterrence, or is punishment the meting out of justice to restabilize an imbalanced system? Is it punitive? Is it educational? Or is it for deterrence? What is the point of a criminal justice system?
Revenge. Revenge. An eye for an eye.
I'm going to call that justice, to rebalance a system that's gone out of balance. So there's three different views of the whole point of a criminal justice system, right? They need to suffer because they made someone suffer. That's revenge. There are outcomes and consequences of bad behavior, which doesn't make you a bad person, but you have to face those with the hope that you will learn from it and readjust to a positive role in society. That's the educational sense of justice. You call it a correctional facility rather than a prison, right? If it's the Department of Corrections, then there's a psychological educational component to what it is you think you're doing in there, right? Obviously, death penalty is not a correctional facility issue. It's a justice question, that you have a consequence, and it's the ultimate consequence. And then the third is that it would be much better to have strict laws and no crime, right? Which is a theory.
But it's not always followed.
Right. If we keep law-abiding people from having guns, criminals won't shoot anybody. If we have strong laws about having guns, then people who are willing to murder won't have guns because they'll be afraid of the 3 years in prison that we'll give them if we find them with a gun. Right? I mean, the concept that you can have strict laws associated with behavior and it will stop that behavior or some other worse behavior is kind of crazy. But we do it all the time.
Well, the Torah says an eye for an eye.
The Torah seems to be wanting to scare the heck out of everybody. The Torah certainly wants to scare the heck out of people. There are severe consequences. It's not just that you're going to get punished by a court or by people. You're going to get punished by the hand of God. He's going to cut your life short. Your wife will be barren. Your crops won't grow. Right? That's what the Torah says. So there's severe consequences for minor things in a world that lives with that faith. We live in a world that tends not to live with that faith. So we try and put a measure of the efficacy of the punishment on the crime, and will that create a society of well-behaving people? That's us projecting back into their system, and that probably doesn't work. That make sense?
So nothing works.
And there's still crime.
Yeah, nothing
Right.
works.
So you have to decide as a citizen in a democracy. Do you think there should be more prisons or fewer prisons? Do you think there should be tougher laws or there should be better education? That's the debate. That's been the law and order debate in presidential and local elections in every state in this country for the last 100 years, ever since we got out of the Wild Wild West. Right. That's the essential debate. And the 3 strikes and you're out laws in the 1980s, which overfilled prison populations with low-level drug offenders, is now admittedly a disaster, right? Because everyone was enthusiastic about throwing people in prison, but nobody funded the construction of new prisons, right? So now you see states like New York and New Jersey's considering it, just pardoning all the low-level offenders and letting them out, right? And you have to figure, well, what was the purpose of their being in there? Was it protect society? Were we wrong about drugs? Have they learned their lesson? Is it not 3 strikes, you're out? I mean, all those things come into play. And boy, if you want rhetoric, you can ask a couple of those questions at a presidential debate, and we'll see what happens. But that's what people are voting about. Okay, we're going to stop there because on 31A1, we're about to return to Yehoshua ben Korcha. Someone's going to try and bring him in, the guy who combines separate testimonies, and they're going to try and apply it to this contradictory testimony. All right? So we're on for every Monday in July. Just keep coming. All right? And the internet seems to have gone out again at some point, but I'm going to end the live video.